When I was 6, my mother became pregnant with what would become my biggest curse, my brother, Kevin. To hide from the family planning officials, she decided the easiest solution was to throw me away like yesterday's garbage. She dragged me to Uncle David's house on a cold March evening, my belongings stuffed in a grocery bag. Uncle David and Aunt Ruth were already struggling with twin daughters, Emma and Lisa, both 8 years old and growing expensive. Adding another child to their burden was impossible, but my mother had prepared for their refusal. She dropped to her knees on their doorstep and began the performance of a lifetime. Within minutes, half the neighborhood gathered to watch the drama unfold. Nothing drew crowds like family shame, aired in public. "Please," she wailed, clutching Uncle David's legs like a drowning woman. "Just keep Helena until the baby is born. Treat her however you want, like a servant, like a dog, as long as she doesn't die in the streets." She pushed me forward like an unwanted offering, then walked away without looking back. Not even when I called Mama, in the broken voice that still haunts my dreams. I spent that night on their doorstep, clutching my plastic bag and staring at the moon. At 6, I invented fantasies where the moon goddess would rescue me and take me somewhere my parents would weep and beg for my return. Then I would refuse them, cold and powerful in my celestial palace. Children's revenge dreams are pathetic things, but they were all I had. Inside, Uncle David and Aunt Ruth fought until dawn. Her voice was sharp with fury. They couldn't afford another child. His was tired with reluctant compassion. I fell asleep, listening to my name spoken like a curse word. Morning came with Uncle David's gentle hand on my shoulder. Inside, Aunt Ruth stood frozen by her sewing machine, radiating hatred so pure it made the air thick. Emma and Lisa had fled to school, leaving me alone with her volcanic anger. "Say hello to Aunt Ruth," Uncle David encouraged. "Hello, Aunt Ruth," I whispered. She looked through me like I was invisible. "Don't mind her expression," Uncle David said helplessly. "She's actually very kind." I had to try something. "Aunt Ruth, do you like cats or dogs?" She finally looked at me directly, her eyes winter storms. "I hate both." My plan crumbled. I'd practiced meowing and barking, thinking if I could be the right pet, someone might keep me. But when even pets aren't welcome, what's left? The moment Uncle David left for work, terror consumed me. Alone with a woman who viewed me as a disease, I desperately tried to help with breakfast, but she shoved me away. So I gathered every piece of dirty laundry and dragged it to the bathroom, scrubbing frantically. If I couldn't be loved, maybe I could be useful. When the twins returned from school, Emma found me washing clothes with soap and determination. "Helena, Mum says come eat." I forced brightness into my voice. "I'm not hungry. These clothes were so dirty, but I'm making them clean." Lisa peered over Emma's shoulder and shrieked, "Mum, she's washing my underwear." Aunt Ruth appeared like an avenging spirit. Seeing what I held, she froze completely, her expression cycling through emotions I couldn't read. At home, I'd always helped with all laundry. I didn't understand the problem. "Stop! Come eat now." "I'm really not hungry," I insisted. "I just wanted to help make everything nice for you." Something flickered in her face. She snatched the clothes away and dumped them back. "Eat now, or I'll send you back to your mother." The threat shot ice through my veins. I ran to the kitchen faster than lightning. Lisa sat wearing her mother's cold expression, her resentment obvious. She knew the fights were my fault, knew her secure world had been invaded, and hated me with pure childhood hatred. I served myself barely any rice, then put half back. 3 tiny pieces of vegetable. Nothing else. I headed for the corner stool where I'd planned to eat on the floor, away from their family table. "Where are you going?" Aunt Ruth's voice stopped me. I pointed to the stool. "I'll sit here, out of your way." She stared at my pathetic portion for long moments. Something worked behind her eyes. Then she cursed my mother viciously and snatched my bowl away. She filled it properly, real portions, not scraps. Vegetables, eggs, even pieces of pork from the stir-fry. Sit at the table. Eat like a human being. The unexpected kindness overwhelmed me. Tears fell before I could stop them. Lisa slammed her chopsticks down. What are you crying about? We feed you and let you live here, and you're still crying. I shook my head frantically. I'm happy. My parents threw me away, but you're letting me stay so I won't beg in the streets. Something shifted in the air between us, fragile but real. That first week, swallows built a nest outside our kitchen window. Aunt Ruth called it lucky. Swallows only nested where fortune would follow. Her mood brightened, and she decided to make me clothes. Using fabric scraps, she created a patchwork jacket that made me look like the swallows outside. When I tried it on, she stepped back with something like pride. Just like a little swallow. My work really is the best. She embroidered a small swallow on the chest with careful stitches. Perfect. You won't find craftsmanship like this anywhere. The next day, she announced I was starting elementary school. Terror shot through me. School cost money they didn't have. I don't need school. I can work here, help with sewing. Children who don't go to school end up begging forever, she said sternly. You'll learn everything they teach, and when you grow up, you'll repay every yuan I spend. The debt. Even at 6, I understood I was accumulating a debt that would follow me always. I promise, I said solemnly, I'll earn lots of money and buy you beautiful things. Aunt Ruth looked startled. She hadn't expected me to overhear her complaints about their finances, about not buying new clothes in 2 years. You haven't even been to kindergarten. You'll be lucky not to fail everything. What's failing? Getting goose eggs on tests. My eyes lit up. The school gives eggs as prizes. She burst into laughter, the first I'd heard from her. You silly child. You'd be happy in a garbage dump if someone called it a palace. But I had made her laugh. That moment sustained me for weeks. On my first school day, I accidentally brought Aunt Ruth her biggest order. My desk mate, pretty as a TV star from a wealthy family, admired my swallow jacket. My Aunt Ruth made it, I said proudly. She's the most skilled seamstress ever. After school, the girl's mother examined my jacket with expert eyes. Tell your aunt I need 3 like this, different colours, 20 yuan each. I raced home bursting with excitement. 60 yuan! More than Aunt Ruth made in 2 days. She worked 3 nights straight, creating pink, yellow and green jackets with embroidered animals. When I delivered them, my desk mate squealed with joy. Her mother handed me 60 crisp bills. I clutched the money all the way home, terrified of losing it. Aunt Ruth held each note to the light, then broke into the widest grin I'd seen. Helena, you really are my lucky little swallow. She gave me 5 yuan as commission. I hesitated. My mother said, never take things that aren't yours. I'm teaching you to control money before it controls you, Aunt Ruth explained. People who don't understand money become its slaves. At dinner, she proudly told Uncle David about our success. When swallows choose your house, good fortune follows. But Lisa's face darkened. She left without eating. I was learning to read moods. Lisa's unhappiness made me afraid to enjoy success. Later, I snuck into our shared room with a pudding cup I'd bought with my commission money. I got this for you, I offered shyly. Lisa glared. Where did you get money? Aunt Ruth gave me pocket money. I won't eat something you bought. If you don't eat it, it'll melt and waste Aunt Ruth's money. She took it and devoured half in one bite. Don't think this means I like you. I know you hate me, but I don't hate you. Why not? You let me share your room and tell me stories from books. She was silent for a moment. Do you hate your parents? I looked down. I don't know. You should. Adults who bring children into the world should raise them properly. Your parents are heartless. In that moment, Lisa seemed to glow with righteous anger on my behalf. She handed me the last bite of pudding. "Try it." The sweetness melted on my tongue just as Aunt Ruth's voice called from outside. We rushed to see her on a ladder by the swallow nest. "Sparrows invaded the nest. They threw out an egg," she explained, pointing to broken shells on the ground. She pulled out the sparrow's nesting material and tossed it away. The sparrows chattered angrily in the distance. "Build your own nest," Aunt Ruth shouted back. "Try stealing again, and I'll beat you dead." The next day, bird droppings splattered her head when she went shopping. "Spiteful creatures," she muttered, carrying an umbrella afterward. I envied that nest of swallows. Everyone welcomed them, and Aunt Ruth fought off intruders to protect their home. This was Uncle David and Aunt Ruth's house, Emma and Lisa's house, the swallows' house. But it wasn't mine. Not really, not yet. But as I watched Aunt Ruth defend those swallows so fiercely, a seed of something dangerous began growing in my heart. Something that whispered, "What if someone tried to take your place here too? What would you do to protect what's yours?" I was only 6, but I was already learning that in this world, you fight for what you love, or you lose it. Forever. Years passed like pages turning in a book, each one marking my transformation from abandoned child to beloved daughter. By the time I turned 15, Aunt Ruth had stopped correcting people who called me her daughter. Uncle David introduced me as his niece with such pride that strangers assumed I was his own blood. Emma and Lisa, now in high school, defended me fiercely against anyone who dared suggest I didn't belong. But the most dangerous transformations happen quietly, in the spaces between heartbeats. I excelled at everything: academics, helping with Aunt Ruth's sewing business, managing household finances. My weekly earnings from bringing in new customers had grown from 5 UN to 50. Teachers praised my discipline. Neighbours envied Aunt Ruth for having such a responsible daughter. I was perfect in every way that mattered. Except I was building myself into a weapon, and nobody realised it. The first crack in my peaceful world came during my second year of high school. Emma burst through the front door one afternoon, her school bag flying as she rushed to find Aunt Ruth. "Mum, Helena's birth mother is at the school gate asking teachers about her grades." Ice flooded my veins. I hadn't seen my mother in 9 years, not since that night she'd walked away without looking back. In my mind, she'd become more myth than memory. A cautionary tale Aunt Ruth used when she wanted to remind me how good I had it. What did she want to know? Aunt Ruth's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut glass. Everything. Helena's class ranking, which university she might attend, whether she's received any scholarship offers. Emma's face was flushed with indignation. "She was taking notes, Mum, like she was collecting information for something." Aunt Ruth's expression darkened into something I'd never seen before. Not anger, but calculation. Pure, cold calculation. "Helena," she said quietly, "go to your room and study. Don't come out until I call you." I obeyed, but I pressed my ear to the door and listened to every word of the conversation that followed. "She's sniffing around because Helena's about to become valuable," Aunt Ruth told Uncle David that evening. "Top student, guaranteed university admission, scholarship potential. That woman can smell opportunity like a vulture smells death." "Surely she wouldn't try to take Helena back now," Uncle David protested. "Not after all these years." Aunt Ruth's laugh was bitter as medicine. "David, you're too good-hearted to understand people like her. She threw Helena away when she was a burden. Now that Helena's an investment about to pay dividends, she wants her back. What can we do? We prepare for war." Those words burned themselves into my memory. War as if my mother was an enemy army approaching our gates, ready to siege everything I'd built. The attack came 2 weeks later. My mother arrived on a Saturday morning when Uncle David was at the market and the twins were visiting friends. She'd timed it perfectly. Only Aunt Ruth and I were home, and she knew Aunt Ruth wouldn't cause a scene in front of me. She looked different, older, softer around the edges, wearing clothes that suggested moderate prosperity. Kevin, now 15 and tall as a man, stood beside her like a bodyguard. He had the kind of handsome features that made girls stare, and the kind of cold eyes that made smart people nervous. "Helena," my mother said, her voice dripping with maternal sweetness she'd never possessed when I was small. "Look how beautiful you've become. You look just like me at your age." I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to speak. This woman was a stranger, wearing my mother's face, speaking with practiced affection that felt like insects crawling on my skin. "Hello, Mother," I managed finally. Aunt Ruth appeared behind me, her presence solid as a wall. "What do you want, Laura?" "I've come to see my daughter." My mother's smile never wavered, and to discuss her future. Her future is already decided. University, then whatever career she chooses. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. My mother stepped closer, and I caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something else. Desperation, maybe, or greed. Helena's so intelligent, so accomplished. It seems wrong to burden you with university expenses when she has parents perfectly capable of supporting her education. The lie was so smooth, so reasonable sounding, that for a moment even I almost believed she cared. Aunt Ruth's laugh could have frozen summer. "Support her education? You mean take her back now that all the hard work is done?" "I mean, give her the love only a birth mother can provide." My mother's performance was flawless. Wounded maternal devotion fighting against cruel accusations. Helena belongs with her real family. Kevin's been asking about his sister for years. Kevin nodded on cue, but his eyes held no warmth when they looked at me. If anything, I saw calculation there. The same measuring look my mother had given me 15 years ago when she decided I was disposable. "Helena," my mother continued, turning those practiced tears in my direction, "don't you miss your real mother? Don't you want to know your brother?" Before I could answer, Aunt Ruth stepped forward. "Helena, go inside and finish your homework." But I didn't move. Something was building inside my chest. Not fear, not sadness, but a cold, bright fury that felt like swallowing lightning. "No," I said quietly. Everyone stared at me. "No," I repeated, louder this time. "I don't want to know my brother. I don't miss my real mother. My real mother is standing right here, and you abandoned me like garbage 9 years ago." My mother's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing something ugly underneath. Then she recovered, reaching for me with trembling hands. "Helena, sweetheart, you don't understand. I was young, scared, desperate. I thought you'd have a better life here temporarily. But now I'm worth something," I finished for her. "Now I can earn money, bring prestige to the family, maybe marry well and support my useless brother." Kevin's face flushed red. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" Aunt Ruth's voice cut through his words like a blade. "Get off my property! Now!" "You can't keep my daughter from me forever," my mother said, her mask finally falling away completely. "She's my blood. I have rights." "The only right you had was to raise her. You gave that up when you left her on my doorstep like a foundling." Aunt Ruth moved to stand beside me, her hand firm on my shoulder. "Helena is my daughter now, in every way that matters." My mother's eyes hardened into chips of black ice. "We'll see about that." They left, but not before Kevin looked back at me with an expression that promised trouble. I'd seen that look before on bullies' faces, right before they destroyed something beautiful, just because they couldn't have it themselves. That night, Aunt Ruth sat me down for the most important conversation of my young life. "Helena, I need you to understand something. Your mother will be back, and next time she'll come prepared. She might bring officials, claim you're being held against your will. She might spread lies about how we've treated you. She might even try to have you kidnapped." My blood chilled. What can we do? We fight smart. Aunt Ruth pulled out a folder thick with papers. I've been preparing for this day since you were 8 years old. Adoption papers, school records, medical records, witness statements from neighbours. Everything that proves you've been my daughter for 9 years in every way except biology. She handed me a small recording device. From now on, if she contacts you, at school, on the street, anywhere, you record every word. Let her reveal her true motives. People like your mother always overplay their hand eventually. What if she tries to take me by force? Aunt Ruth's smile was sharp as broken glass. Then she'll discover exactly how far a mother will go to protect her child. 2 weeks later, my mother made her next move. I was walking home from school when a sleek black car pulled up beside me. Kevin got out, now wearing expensive clothes that made him look like a young businessman rather than a village boy. "Helena," he called out with fake brotherly warmth. "Mom wants to take you for dinner. Family time." I palmed the recording device and pressed record. "I already ate." "Come on, don't be difficult. We're family." "We've never been family. You're strangers who happen to share my DNA." His mask slipped slightly. "Mum says you've gotten arrogant living with these people, acting like you're better than your real relatives." "I am better than you." The words came out colder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. "I earned my place through hard work. You want to claim me now because I'm useful." Kevin's face darkened. "You think you're so smart, but you're just a charity case playing dress-up. Those people will throw you away the moment you stop being profitable. Unlike my real mother, who threw me away when I cost too much." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "Get in the car, Helena. Mum's done asking nicely. Let go of me. You're coming home, whether you like it or not. Mum has plans for you." I pressed the emergency button Aunt Ruth had sewn into my jacket collar. A tiny device connected directly to Uncle David's phone. Within seconds, I heard his motorcycle roaring toward us. Kevin heard it too. His grip loosened just enough for me to wrench free and run toward the approaching headlight. Uncle David skidded to a stop between Kevin and me, his usually gentle face transformed by protective fury. "Touch my daughter again, and I'll break your hands." Kevin backed toward the car, but not before shooting me a look that promised retribution. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Uncle David said quietly. "Because if you come near Helena again, I'll make sure the police know about your little kidnapping attempt." The car sped away, leaving me shaking in the middle of the road. That night, I played the recording for Aunt Ruth and Uncle David. My mother's voice came through crystal clear on the device. "Mom has plans for you." "Perfect," Aunt Ruth said with grim satisfaction. "She just admitted to conspiracy. Now we have everything we need." But I was learning that some wars aren't won in courtrooms or police stations. Some wars are won by becoming someone your enemies can't afford to cross. "Aunt Ruth," I said carefully, "I want to accelerate my university timeline. Graduate early, get accepted to the best school possible." "Why the rush?" I looked at my reflection in the dark window, no longer the abandoned 6-year-old who'd begged for scraps, but someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. "Because the higher I climb, the farther they'll have to fall." 3 years later, I stood in the marble lobby of Beijing's most prestigious law firm, wearing a tailored suit that cost more than most families earned in 6 months. My reflection in the polished floors showed someone unrecognizable from that desperate 15-year-old who'd promised revenge. I was 21, armed with a law degree earned 2 years early, and backed by connections most people spent decades building. The receptionist's voice cut through my thoughts. "Miss Helena, Mr. Chen will see you now." Mr. Chen was one of Beijing's most feared corporate lawyers, the kind of man who dismantled companies before breakfast and destroyed reputations by lunch. When Aunt Ruth's former customer, now a wealthy fashion mogul, had recommended me for an internship, Mr. Chen had been skeptical. That skepticism died during my first case presentation. "Helena," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his mahogany desk, "I have a proposition that might interest you." I sat with the perfect posture Aunt Ruth had drilled into me years ago. I'm listening. "My firm is expanding into rural legal aid, corporate responsibility, image enhancement, you understand. We need someone who speaks both languages, village and boardroom." His smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Someone with your background could translate between worlds. What kind of cases?" "Land disputes mostly. Rural families getting pushed off property by development companies, inheritance fraud, family abandonment cases." He leaned forward slightly. "The kind of injustices that make headlines when handled properly. Family abandonment cases." The irony was so perfect, it felt like destiny arranging chess pieces. "I accept," I said without hesitation. "Don't you want to know the salary?" "Money isn't my primary motivation for this particular position." 6 months later, I was ready to make my first move. I'd spent those months carefully researching my birth family's situation. Kevin had dropped out of high school and was running with local gangs, racking up debts and legal troubles. My father had developed a gambling addiction that consumed most of their savings. My mother worked 3 jobs trying to keep the family afloat, but they were drowning in debt and desperation. Perfect conditions for Phase 1. I hired a private investigator to monitor them for 2 weeks, documenting everything. Kevin's drug deals behind the village school, my father's weekly visits to underground gambling dens, my mother's attempts to borrow money from increasingly dangerous sources. The photos and videos painted a picture of a family in complete moral and financial collapse. Then, I sent my mother a letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by expensive courier to ensure maximum neighbourhood attention. The envelope bore the letterhead of Chen & Associates, Beijing's most prestigious law firm. Inside, my message was simple. "Dear Mother, I hear you've been having financial difficulties. As your daughter, I feel obligated to help. Please meet me at the Grand Hotel in the county seat this Saturday at 2 p.m. Come alone. Helena." She arrived 30 minutes early, wearing her best clothes and carrying herself with nervous excitement. I watched from the hotel restaurant as she paced the lobby, checking her appearance in every reflective surface. She'd obviously spent money they didn't have on a new outfit and hairstyle. When I finally appeared, descending the marble staircase in a business suit that cost more than her annual income, her eyes widened with something between pride and greed. "Helena," she breathed, rushing toward me with arms outstretched. "You look so successful, so beautiful. I always knew you'd make something of yourself." I allowed her to embrace me briefly, then stepped back. "Thank you for coming. Shall we sit?" I led her to a private corner table where 2 cups of tea waited, the most expensive blend the hotel offered, the kind of casual luxury that would emphasize the gap between our current circumstances. "I've been following your family's situation," I began without preamble. "Kevin's legal troubles, father's gambling debts, your employment struggles." Her composure cracked slightly. "How did you—" "I'm a lawyer now, Mother. Information is my profession." I sipped my tea calmly while she processed this. "I also know about the loan sharks you've been dealing with. Very dangerous people from what I understand." The colour drained from her face. "Helena, you have to understand. We never meant for things to get so bad. Kevin made some mistakes, but he's young. Your father's illness. Gambling addiction isn't an illness you catch, Mother. It's a choice you make repeatedly." "Please," she said, reaching across the table to grab my hands. "We're family, blood relatives. Surely you wouldn't let your own parents lose everything." This was the moment I'd been planning for 6 years. The moment when I would reveal exactly how much power the abandoned child had accumulated. "You're right," I said softly. "Family should help family." Hope flared in her eyes like struck matches. which is why I've prepared a comprehensive assistance package for your family. I pulled out a thick contract from my briefcase. Legal representation for Kevin's criminal charges, debt consolidation for father's gambling obligations, a monthly stipend to cover basic living expenses. She stared at the papers with desperate hunger. How much? 200,000 yuan total. Enough to solve all your problems and set your family on stable footing. 200,000. She could barely speak the number. Helena, how could we ever repay such generosity? I smiled, and something about that expression made her instinctively lean back. Mother, you misunderstand. This isn't generosity. It's a business transaction. I turned to page 12 of the contract. In exchange for this financial assistance, you'll be signing legal documentation acknowledging that you voluntarily relinquished all parental rights to me in 2010. You'll also provide sworn testimony detailing the circumstances of that abandonment. Her face went white as bone. What? You'll state, for legal record, that you left a 6-year-old child on strangers' doorsteps because she was inconvenient to your family planning. You'll acknowledge that David and Ruth Jiang became my legal guardians and sole parents through your deliberate abandonment. But why would you need such documentation? Because, Mother, I'm building a case study on family abandonment for my firm's rural legal aid program. Your story will be featured prominently in our public awareness campaign about parents who treat children like disposable property. Understanding dawned in her eyes like a cold sunrise. You want to humiliate us publicly. I want to tell the truth publicly. There's a difference. I closed the contract calmly. Of course, this offer is entirely voluntary. You're free to decline and handle your family's problems through other means. She looked around the expensive hotel restaurant, at the affluent diners, at the son she'd thrown away, now offering salvation with strings attached. And if we don't sign, then you don't sign. Kevin faces his criminal charges alone. Father deals with loan sharks alone. You continue working 3 jobs while your family collapses around you. I stood to leave. Alone. Wait. Her voice cracked like breaking glass. Could we modify the terms? I sat back down, my expression neutral. What did you have in mind? The money, but without the public testimony. Just private documentation for your files. I'm afraid that's not possible. The public education component is essential to the program's funding. I watched her face cycle through desperation, anger, and calculation. However, I am prepared to add one additional benefit to sweeten the arrangement. What? Kevin can intern at my firm after serving his reduced sentence, learn legitimate business skills, build a respectable career. I paused for effect. Assuming he's capable of legitimate work, of course. She was trapped, and we both knew it. Sign the contract and save her family while publicly admitting her failures as a mother. Refuse and watch everything collapse while the daughter she'd abandoned prospered just out of reach. How long do I have to decide? The offer expires Sunday at midnight. After that, my attention turns to other cases. Other families more deserving of assistance? She signed that Saturday night, her hands shaking as she wrote her name on documents that would broadcast her shame across 3 provinces. But I wasn't finished. Phase 1 was complete, but the real revenge was still coming. 6 months later, our family abandonment campaign made national headlines. My mother's story became the poster case for parental neglect. Her name and photograph plastered across newspapers and websites throughout China. The documentation she'd signed was airtight. No legal recourse, no way to claim misrepresentation. The social workers who visited her village weren't investigating her past crimes. They were investigating current ones, anonymous reports about Kevin's continued criminal activities, about my father's gambling debts endangering the family's stability. When they discovered evidence of ongoing neglect and financial irresponsibility, Kevin was removed from the home and placed in a residential rehabilitation program. My father was mandated into gambling addiction treatment. My mother was enrolled in mandatory parenting classes, at age 45 learning basic child-rearing concepts from social workers young enough to be her children. The final humiliation came when local newspapers picked up the story. Headlines reading, "Mother who abandoned daughter now needs help raising son," appeared in papers across our home province. Neighbours who'd watched my mother kneel on Uncle David's doorstep 15 years ago now whispered about karma and justice. I was interviewed as the successful daughter who'd risen above abandonment, my carefully worded responses painting me as a reluctant victim, forced to save the family that had thrown her away. "I hold no anger toward my birth mother," I told reporters with perfect composure. "Sometimes helping family means holding them accountable for their choices. I hope my assistance enables them to become the parents they were always capable of being." The subtext was clear to anyone with intelligence. I had won completely. But the sweetest victory came in the phone call 3 weeks later. My mother's voice was small and broken, barely recognisable as the woman who'd once demanded I sacrifice my future for Kevin's mistakes. "Helena," she whispered, "I need to ask you something." "Yes. Do you think you could ever forgive me? For what I did when you were little?" I let the silence stretch until she was probably wondering if I'd hung up. "Mother," I said finally, "forgiveness isn't something you can demand or even request. It's something that might happen naturally when the person who hurt you proves they've genuinely changed." Have I proved that?" Ask me again in 10 years. I hung up without saying goodbye, just as she'd walked away from me 15 years ago without looking back. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't about getting even. It was about becoming so powerful that the people who'd hurt you had to beg for the mercy they'd never shown you. And the most beautiful part? They would spend the rest of their lives knowing that mercy was entirely within my discretion to grant or withhold. 2 years after my mother's public humiliation, I received an invitation that would complete my transformation from abandoned child to untouchable power. The envelope was cream-coloured silk, embossed with gold lettering that announced the wedding of Zhang Wei, heir to one of Beijing's most influential pharmaceutical dynasties. Inside, a personal note in elegant calligraphy. "Helena, your brilliant work on the rural healthcare legal reform has impressed my family tremendously. We would be honoured by your presence at our celebration." I'd met Zhang Wei during a high-profile case where his family's company was accused of exploiting rural communities. Instead of the adversarial relationship everyone expected, I'd helped them restructure their rural outreach programs in ways that benefited both the company and the villages. My reputation as someone who could bridge worlds, corporate and rural, powerful and powerless, had opened doors I'd only dreamed of as a child. The wedding was held at Beijing's most exclusive hotel. As I walked through the reception in a gown that cost more than Uncle David's annual income, I felt the weight of curious stares. Here was the famous Helena Zhang, the abandoned village girl who'd risen to influence elite circles while maintaining her roots. What no one knew was that this wedding invitation represented the final piece of my revenge puzzle. "Helena!" A familiar voice made my blood freeze. I turned to see Kevin approaching through the crowd, wearing an ill-fitting rental tuxedo and a desperate smile. He'd been released from rehabilitation 6 months earlier, supposedly reformed and ready to rebuild his life. But the hollowness in his eyes told a different story. "What are you doing here?" I asked quietly. "I'm working security for the event company. When I saw your name on the guest list..." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Helena, we need to talk." "There's nothing to discuss. There's everything to discuss." His grip on my arm was too tight, drawing unwanted attention from nearby guests. Mum's in the hospital, stress-induced heart problems. Dad's gambling again, worse than before. The monthly payments you promised stopped coming 3 months ago. I looked down at his hand on my designer gown, then back at his face. Remove your hand. Not until you listen. We kept our part of the deal. Mum did those interviews, signed those papers, let you destroy our family's reputation. You owe us. I owe you nothing. My voice was arctic calm, but something in my expression made him release me immediately. The contract specified assistance, contingent on continued compliance with rehabilitation terms. Kevin's drug relapse voided the agreement. His face went white. How did you know about... I know everything about your family, Kevin. The drug dealing resumed within 2 weeks of your release. Father's back at the underground gambling dens every Tuesday and Friday. Mother's been borrowing money from loan sharks again to cover your debts. I smoothed my gown where his desperate fingers had wrinkled the silk. Did you really think I wouldn't monitor my investments? You're our sister. Our blood. No, I said with perfect clarity. I'm a stranger who happened to share a womb with you for 9 months. Nothing more. Kevin's desperation turned to rage, the same ugly expression I'd seen on his 15-year-old face. You think you're untouchable now. You think these rich people will protect you when they find out what you really are. Several nearby guests were starting to stare. I could see Jiang Wei's father approaching with concern written across his face. What am I, Kevin? A vengeful little bitch who destroyed her own family for sport. The words hung in the perfumed air between us like a challenge. Around us, conversations died as more people turned to witness the confrontation. I smiled then, not the practiced professional expression I wore in boardrooms, but something harder, more genuine. You're absolutely right. Kevin blinked, clearly expecting denial or anger. I am vengeful. I did destroy our family, and I enjoyed every moment of it. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear my next words. Because 15 years ago, our mother taught me that family members are disposable when they become inconvenient. I am simply applying the lesson she gave me. Helena, Jiang Wei's father, had reached us, his face carefully neutral. Is everything all right? Mr. Jiang, I apologize for the disturbance. I turned my back on Kevin completely. This gentleman was just leaving. Security materialized as if summoned by magic. Real security, not Kevin's temporary employment. He was escorted out with professional efficiency while I accepted Mr. Jiang's offer of champagne and returned to civilized conversation. But the confrontation had planted seeds I knew would grow into something larger. 3 weeks later, the final act began. My mother appeared at my Beijing law office unannounced, looking decades older than her actual age. The stress of the past 2 years had carved deep lines around her eyes and mouth. She wore the kind of desperate respectability that comes from borrowing clothes and courage in equal measure. Helena, she said as my secretary tried to turn her away, please, just 5 minutes. I could have had her removed, should have had her removed, but curiosity won over caution. 5 minutes, I agreed, leading her into my office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She stood in the centre of my professional sanctuary, surrounded by law degrees and achievement awards, clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd built. You've done so well, she said finally, better than I ever dreamed possible. Was there a point to this visit? Kevin is dead. The words hit the air between us like stones dropped in still water. I felt nothing. No grief, no satisfaction, no surprise, just acknowledgement of an expected outcome. How? Drug overdose 3 days ago, the funeral is tomorrow. Her voice was hollow, mechanical. I came to tell you myself, to ask if you might consider coming home for the service. Why would I do that? Because despite everything, he was your brother. I walked to my window, looking down at the city I'd conquered through sheer will and careful planning. Somewhere far below, people struggled with the same desperations that had once driven my mother to abandon a 6-year-old child. "Mother," I said without turning around, "do you know what Kevin's death means to me? I hope it might mean something, enough to bring you home." I turned to face her then, and whatever she saw in my expression made her take an involuntary step backward. "It means my calculations were correct. I predicted he would be dead within 3 years of his release. Drug-dealing criminals from broken families rarely live to see 30. I returned to my desk, sitting with perfect posture. "His death validates my decision to cut all ties with your family. Helena," her voice broke on my name, "how did you become so cold?" "I became exactly what I needed to become to survive the family that threw me away." I pulled out a thick folder from my desk drawer. "But since you're here, let me share something interesting." I spread photographs across my desk, surveillance images of my parents and Kevin over the past 2 years taken by the private investigators I'd hired to monitor them. "Did you know Kevin was selling drugs to middle school children? That father borrowed money from the same loan sharks who break people's legs for late payments? That you've been lying to social workers about your family's compliance with court-ordered rehabilitation?" She stared at the evidence of their failures with dawning horror. "I have enough documentation here to have father arrested for illegal gambling, you charged with providing false testimony to social services, and Kevin posthumously exposed as a drug dealer who targeted children." I gathered the photos calmly. "But I won't be using any of it." "Why not?" "Because Kevin's death accomplished what legal action never could. It ended your family line's ability to hurt anyone else." I stood, walking around the desk to face her directly. "Your husband will drink himself to death within 2 years. You'll spend whatever time you have left caring for him while drowning in debts you'll never repay. And when you're both gone, there will be no one left to remember your names or mourn your passing." "Helena, please." "The abandoned child you threw away became everything you pretended to value: educated, successful, respected. The son you kept became everything you should have feared: criminal, violent, ultimately self-destructive." I opened my office door. "That's poetry, Mother. That's justice." She walked toward the door with the slow steps of someone carrying unbearable weight. At the threshold, she turned back one final time. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd kept you instead of him?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "Every day," I answered honestly. "I would have become nothing, a village wife bearing children for a man who couldn't support them, trapped in the same cycle of poverty and desperation that created you." I smiled, and this time it was warm, genuine, even grateful. Abandoning me was the greatest gift you ever gave me. It forced me to become someone worthy of the family that chose to keep me. She left without another word. That evening, I called Aunt Ruth and Uncle David. They were planning their retirement, finally able to relax after decades of hard work. Emma was a successful teacher, Lisa a respected nurse. We were a family built on choice rather than obligation, love rather than biology. "Mom," I said to Aunt Ruth, using the title that had become natural over the years, "I have news about my birth family." I told them about Kevin's death, about my mother's visit, about the final severing of ties to a past that had never truly been mine. "Are you all right?" Uncle David asked with characteristic gentleness. "I'm perfect," I replied, and meant it completely. 6 months later, I established the Jung Foundation for Abandoned Children, funded by my legal practice's profits, and aimed at preventing other children from experiencing what I had endured. The foundation's mission statement, printed on letterhead bearing my name, read simply, Every child deserves a family that chooses them. My birth mother died 2 years later, exactly as I'd predicted, exhausted by caring for my gambling-addicted father and drowning in insurmountable debt. I learned about her death from a newspaper obituary that mentioned her surviving daughter had become a prominent Beijing lawyer. I didn't attend her funeral. Instead, I spent that day at Uncle David and Aunt Ruth's house, helping Aunt Ruth tend the garden, where swallows still nested each spring. 3 generations of swallows had chosen our family's home, just as I had been chosen, just as I had chosen them in return. "The swallows are back," Aunt Ruth observed as we watched a pair building their nest under the familiar eaves. "They always come back," I agreed, "to places where they're wanted." That night, as I drove back to Beijing in my luxury car, I thought about the 6-year-old girl who had sat on a doorstep 15 years ago, abandoned and terrified, dreaming impossible dreams of revenge and rescue. Both dreams had come true, in ways that little girl could never have imagined. The abandoned child had become someone so powerful that the people who threw her away spent their final years begging for mercy she had no obligation to provide. And the rescued child had built a family so strong, so loving, so permanent, that nothing could ever threaten it again. Justice, I realised, wasn't about destroying your enemies, and it was about becoming someone they could never hurt again.